Hi everyone, welcome back to Juicy Conversations with Julie. As always, I am Julie, I'm your host, and we are back today with a brand new episode. Before we get into today's topics, if you like the podcast or this episode, please let me know by leaving a rating and a review, as well as following Juicy Conversations on all social media and streaming platforms. If you want to take the conversation further, those platforms are also there for you to be able to communicate with me. In the meantime, time for me to welcome my guests. So welcome, guys. Thank you very much for joining today. Do you want to quickly start by introducing yourselves, and then we'll get on to the topics?
Well, thank you very much for having me. So my name is Kirsty Stiles. I am joining you from Liverpool in the northwest of the UK. I'm a journalist by profession. I used to work as a technology journalist, and what I learned when I was working as a technology journalist was, my God, a lot of this is terrifying. And so I was in London doing that, moved back up a few years ago, and I'm now doing a PhD looking particularly at the environmental impact of journalism. So taking some of that technology expertise and sort of the journalistic expertise and some of my sort of personal concerns about, the planet that we call home. And I'm also a lecturer at the University of Huddersfield, and I do stand-up comedy about climate change, would you believe?
Lovely. Thank you.
I'm Malvika Padden. I'm also a journalist by profession. I work in London currently. I'm still on the grind, unlike Chrissy, who's moved on to finding other things. So for me, I think I work on the trends desk. So a lot of my work kind of has to do with what people are searching for. Would you believe no one's actually searching for anything related to climate change, which is kind of depressing. Which is why environment and climate change and sustainability are topics that are of personal importance and passion to me. And outside of my work, my day job, I work for random publications that write about environment, and I do my little bit, however I can, writing about people doing good things.
Amazing.
My God, I've already written down, no one is searching for climate change. Oh my God.
Yeah. I'm partly surprised and partly not, but yeah, we'll get into that in a second. I'm Julia, I'm your host. As always, the same Julia, haven't changed since the last time you would have heard my voice. And so today, if you haven't guessed it, we are going to be talking about climate change, amongst other things. We're just going to be looking at kind of the news we've seen in the last few months. I think we've all seen a few worrying headlines throughout the summer. And then also talking about eco-anxiety, how we can ease that, how we can counter that, what we can do. And then to end on a little lighter note, we'll just look at some of the good news, some of the positives when it comes to climate change. We'll look at little things that you can even implement in your everyday to feel like you're contributing in some way. So to start us off, as I was telling you guys before we started recording, throughout the summer with everything that we've seen all around the world, but I think a lot of the time people will start to connect with something when it hits close to home. What we've seen happening in Europe, I've had a lot of conversations about climate change with friends online, and I've seen a lot of conversations happen. And just like it might be surprising that not a lot of people seem to be Googling climate change, I've found that still, even after the summer, a lot of people are very skeptical when it comes to climate change. So I guess a good opening point to situate what we're talking about, what our opinions are. If you had anything to say to anyone that was skeptical still today, what would it kind of be?
So my research is looking at two British newspapers. You may know them, the Guardian and the Daily Mail, and I'm looking at them from their coverage of this issue and compared to everything else that they write about from the 1970s until now, in a way, I would say to people who are sort of skeptical, it's not surprising. While there has been some interesting, some sort of glimmers of coverage over time. I was just reading a Daily Mail edition from 1992 today, and they wrote about green investment, and they wrote about the climate negotiation that was going on at the time. So they recognized that this stuff was happening, but over the course of time and sort of over vast sort of pages of newspapers and pages of websites, every day written, going in the bin, there's been an awful lot of information which sort of sort of sows that seed of question or whatever. So yeah, so I certainly understand people's skepticism. I think today the for me the weight of evidence has now gone in the favor of scientists. There was an awful lot of time where there was a sort of a question of do all scientists agree? For a long time all scientists have agreed. In fact, it was the 1800s when scientists first started to do the research which has proved a lot of the stuff that we know today. So actually we've known about this for quite a long time, but in general public opinion, agreement among scientists is pretty clear. I think some of the skepticism now is because now those who are interested in making money out of this issue say, oh, actually, well, we need innovation. What we need is to innovate, not renewables, whatever. So I think I can see that the conversation has changed and people will go, oh, it's fine. I don't need to do anything. I'm going to get an electric car and that's fine. Or indeed, business as usual just feels okay, doesn't it? It's quite hard, if you're in a car finance contract, for example, to go, oh, well, you actually can't get out of that. So, but what I guess what I would say to those people is, no. I don't know what I would say. Now is the time. The weight of evidence is here, and there actually are some quite simple things that we could do. Probably, we don't have to sort of fly to Mars to sort this problem out, but we do have to change our behaviour. That's probably what I would say. But actually, changing your behaviour can be a positive.
Yeah. So it's something about what Christy said, like that, kind of rang a bell with me. Is I think a lot of the skepticism, obviously, a lot of it also actually does have to do with when businesses get involved, when everybody jumps on the bandwagon of like, oh, we want to go green, we want to be sustainable, and so then the notion of climate change, of the environment, kind of gets linked to businesses and corporations, which automatically has people kind of abandoning it and throwing their hands up, going, oh no, I don't want to support people who already make profits, and I don't want to. The climate change doesn't exist. It's just it's a thing that people came up with to make more money. So I think the skepticism does kind of link a little bit to that. But yeah, again, I think it's also just people trying to, like, in addition to skepticism, there are people who also just know it does exist, but who'd rather just kind of just go business as usual because they don't want to think about it. Because life is a lot of doom and gloom. So maybe they're just like, I can't change what's happening with the environment, right? It's not up to me. Everybody has to do something.
I love Malvika that you flagged the thing about business. So in the academic literature, very boring, the idea of sustainable development people might be familiar with, and sustainable development in the world means that we have a balance between economic development, environmental development, and social development, and those three, that's what you imagine. And unfortunately, if you look at the literature, economics always wins. And so you're super right about businesses, and what's been interesting in maybe the last 5-10 years is that businesses go, oh no, we are green, we've done this and we've done this and we've done this. And I think time and again, you can actually find those claims to be false, but it's really obvious that a business wants to make money, and so they go, whether it's pride or whether it's climate change, they're happy to sort of change it up to sell more stuff. I think what for me is critical, there is if you base your business or your economy entirely on new stuff and throwing it into the hole, like, that is not sustainable. And so the whole idea of sustainable development for me is flawed.
You're absolutely right. I think it comes down to the fact that rather than really focusing on the question of sustainability and the environment and what can we do and what can we change, people are just going, okay, well, how can we continue to work with the same business models, with the same ways of producing, the same rates of production, and incorporate that question into what we're currently doing, when what we are currently doing is the root of the problem. And that extends to things that go way further. Climate change, I mean, we're seeing it a lot where people are looking at capitalism and the way we've built society and our business models, and are finding that it is the root of a lot of the inequality, whether it's human inequality or the unsustainability of how we produce. So I think it's trying to continue to do things as they are, and also consider all of these questions that people are raising, because it's trying to find a way to continue to make profit and to continue to do what you are, but also to not completely ignore the issue, because some people are saying, well, if we don't see change, if we don't see that, we're going to take our money elsewhere. So it's finding those little ways to make it fit within the narrative without actually changing anything, which is what really needs to happen. And just to go back on the skepticism, to bounce back off of what you both said, I think, yeah, there's definitely a mix of people just not wanting to look at the problem. It's a very human thing. When something is frightening, when you don't have the answer, sometimes it is easier to just think, well, I'm just going to continue to live my life. At this point, I don't think it has a lot to do with people not wanting to see the problem or not being clever enough to see the problem. It's just a very daunting, a very complex, and quite a scary issue to talk about, which causes that skepticism. And I think, and you both probably will have something to say, the way we approach the climate emergency, I found, especially throughout recent years, is almost the wrong way, because yes, we have reached a state of emergency, but we've seen it even with COVID. I think cultivating fear and panic in people is not the way to go. And just repeating the facts and saying that scientists are worried and that we're doomed and this is the end and we need to change now isn't necessarily helping. And so what that narrative has done is it's kind of divided us into two teams. Of course, it's a spectrum, but if you go to the extremes, there's one extreme that's absolutely terrified and that go in a state of chaos and constant panic of shouting about it, shaming others and trying to do everything, but just living in the state of constant fear. And you get the other end of the spectrum, which are so overwhelmed by the negativity and by the conflicting news and by the lack of context and understanding that they go the completely other way. And they're like, actually, I don't want to look at this. I don't even know if this is true. And I think that's where the skepticism comes from that other end of the spectrum, which I know in a lot of conversations I've seen of, well, if it's true, why is nothing happening? If it's true, why are businesses not doing this, this, and this? It's kind of almost finding the narrative that suits you. So I think that's why there's so many skeptical people.
Oh, yes, there was a lot of stuff in there.
Sorry, I tend to do that.
No, there was a lot of stuff in there. I mean, there's so many things I would respond to. I guess from the sort of the narrative and the and the narrative that suits you and everything like that. Yeah, I think we've failed, and I'll speak from, I guess, a sort of media perspective here. The media has failed because it is certainly sent mixed messages over time, not least because in the early days, you didn't quite know. But then at the point when we did know, there was still a sort of like, oh, well, we'll probably have to represent both sides just in case. And that's to some extent good journalism. But what we're now faced with is the fact that, yeah, we've got a lot of people, some people who are, you only live once, it doesn't matter. Some people are absolutely terrified. And so what do you do with that? And so a couple of things that I would say is I've read a few really, really good books recently, one of which is called Prosperity Without Growth, and one of which is called The Poverty of Affluence. And essentially both of these books lay out in really good detail the fact that, like, the lives that we lead today, not only are they unsustainable environmentally, but they're unsustainable, they don't make us happy. And they do loads of stuff about, looking around the world, you get to a certain point, there are people who are living in absolute desperate poverty, and people who, are affected, in Pakistan or wherever today by actual effects of climate change. But like, you get to a certain level of affluence, and then the stuff on the top is just garbage. It doesn't matter. And it's reasonably obvious. And so people, for perhaps, we might blame advertising or anything like that. But the fact is, your big car, your whatever it is, anything else that in your life that you feel like you need to get to be who you're going to be, it's not going to get you that, because the things that matter are people, relationships, communities, and as it happens, those things will also be the solutions to the problems that we have. Sack off the big car, go and meet an elderly neighbour who you've not met before, make sure they're okay. And so we don't, I think we do a poor job of, I don't know whether I ever see people saying that as a sort of answer. The other thing I'll just briefly say is solutions journalism, which I've had less experience of, but people do say is a good idea, which is not positive news in the sense that, like, not everything is great, but rather than talking about the problem or being cynical about whatever the issue is, you say people in Rwanda have built a solar farm which is powering, which has increased their, this is an article from 2015 Guardian, which has increased their electricity capacity by 6%, and that is it's renewable. It's something that didn't exist before, and actually in the article they say that is decoupling, which I think is a tricky term, but it is decoupling their economic growth from their environmental impact. So I think, even on a small scale, a community garden is doing this in Liverpool or wherever. Mm-hmm. And so there's all sorts of ways that you can look at that. So yeah, solutions journalism is not sort of positive news, everything is fine, but rather than saying, isn't this dreadful, these are the problems, it says, well, this is the problem and here's a solution. And there's a whole methodology to it, and there's a whole organization behind it, Solutions Journalism Network. But yeah, I think solutions journalism is the other thing that I would flag as something where, the media could do better.
Yeah, like in terms of solutions-based journalism, that is something I've always kind of been personally, you're right, Chrissy. It's not something like I feel like that's easily kind of accessible by the public, because, when things like World Ocean Day or something like that comes up, talking from my perspective as a trends journalist, I always pitch, 5 ways that you can do this or do that, but it's not necessarily always fitting with the narrative of what my job profile is, or what the paper needs, or like what the media, like that particular media outlet might want. So yeah, it's like when it comes to solutions-based things, it's like sometimes the papers and the blogs and the magazines want to write about it, want to cover it, but it doesn't necessarily always resonate with everybody, because obviously it creates an echo chamber of where only people who are looking for those solution-based solution-based media find it, and the other people are still left in that kind of dark patch where they're not actually looking, because they'd rather find comfort in other things, like you mentioned, Julie, your friend. So that's the kind of thing that they'd rather watch, and that's the thing that they'd rather find comfort in. They're not actually looking for.
If I can jump in there, I met the head of a newswire, so a network of journalists that feed into the national news, and I said to them, what my PhD was, and interestingly, she said, "Oh yeah, we've got a journalist, on our newswire," and she said she wanted to cover the environment, and I was like, "You can't cover the environment. No one's going to search for that," as you said, Malvika. So what this person does is pitch it as human interest stories. So, for example, it'll be like, this family lived, completely off grid for a year, or like this family lived without the plastic for a year, that sort of thing. And so I'd never thought of that before. And different to solutions journalism, it's more like people will go, "Oh my God, like, could you possibly do that?" And so that I thought was like a neat way to sort of build in what is a sort of sustainable or reduction sort of message into something that, just sounds interesting. People love, for whatever reason, that like, "Oh my God, you'll never believe these people couldn't possibly destroy the planet. Here's 10 ways."
Yeah, definitely. And to add on to that just a quick side note, and it's going to make sense in a second. I watched there's this French comedian that I love, and he, to be fair, he does kind of similar things to what you do, Kirsty. So what he does is he takes climate issues, he talks about feminism a lot as well, and he incorporates it into his comedy, and it's kind of a way to raise awareness and also have a laugh. And he was saying, with the media today, he was saying, as someone who reads the news, I don't even care if it's true anymore. I just want to go, whoa, no way. And that kind of fits into what you were saying of, we have to find a way, because what you both have been saying is that, so we know that people don't research issues about climate change. If that's because they're worried, if that's because they don't believe in it, if that's because they're sick and tired of the tone behind it, that's something I don't know as much about, but I think it's probably a mix of a lot of those things and many more. But it doesn't mean we should stop talking about it. So in a way, having more of these solution-based articles, or finding a way to cover this topic in a way that will still get views and readability, seems to be an interesting, because we're just going in a vicious circle. If we're thinking, well, nobody's going to read about this, so we're not going to report on it, well, then people aren't going to read about it anymore, and then we're not going to continue to report on it, and it's going to keep being the same cycle where people that read things only read the negatives and read conflicting opinions, and no one is truly informed about what they're talking about. Whereas if we try and push it in a way that we know will captivate people's attention, and as journalists to a certain extent, that is what part of our job is finding out how to get people to read the things, finding that way to present it in a way that people are going to read. And then as we write about it more and more, there'll be more space to identify different ways of reporting on climate change and not only going for those things that we know work and for those titles that work. I think there definitely needs to be a way to inform the public in a different way than what we're doing right now, because it isn't working, so that everybody is more on the same page. We've got less skepticism and people know what to do, because it's all great telling people the planet is burning, this is happening. Like the headlines in the last month, all we've talked about is the heat wave in Europe and the droughts in the US. And then we've had Pakistan recently and the floods. And then we were talking about India breaking world records in terms of the temperatures they were reaching. This is stuff that we definitely need to know. But what is the standard person going to do about it? How can they react? They don't know. And that's why they're probably not going to read it. They're probably not going to bother about it, because you think, well, it's happening all the way in Pakistan. What am I going to do from, for example, Guildford, when in fact there are many things that we can all do? So I think the way we report
for
on
example, Guildford. For example, Guildford, where Julie is.
First town that popped in my brain. Yeah.
So my dream, so I'm from a village which you will not have heard of. It's called Culture, which sounds like culture, but it's not anything like that. And my dream as a sort of, as somebody who tries to do sort of public communication, would be that I could go to the British Legion in my village and speak to my dad's friends, who I sometimes have a beer with when we're watching the football, and, stand up on a stage and work out the way where I get people to be like, yes, okay, we're going to do this, because that would be a dream. The few things I wanted to just chuck back at you were like, back to the searching and the sort of finding things, is that big technology companies have an incredible amount of power in our societies. Mm-hmm. When I was a journalist, I felt that. And it's still true today. And journalists and news media organizations, move to the whims of these companies. And Malvika will probably know more about that on a sort of daily basis. And they could put, when you type in anything, they could put climate change at the top, and they don't.
Yeah.
And really, that's because Google, Facebook are advertising companies. They are companies that rely on people wanting to consume more stuff that they don't need. Absolutely. And so there is a fundamental sort of problem there, if you really wanted to tackle this issue, with the fact that these companies are on the stock market, but private interests, and really are controlling what we see. And so no matter if you had found the best way to talk about this issue, it was hilarious, people were going to get into it, it's really difficult to break through, because those companies are like, no, put our stuff at the top.
Yeah.
Essentially we want people to buy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it is. Google is a very tricky, obvious, and like you said, it's like it's marketed as being about something people are searching for, but it's actually just advertising, business, and so it's not necessarily like we have on a side note, like we have something called breakouts, right? So breakout searches. So sometimes these are the occasional blips where people actually search for things that matter, and they don't necessarily get picked up, because Google is made to profit people. Sometimes it's really quirky stuff, but yeah, sometimes there are things that they can be important, but those are tiny little blips in really irrelevant trends.
Of course, it and I think it just matches the business model that we were talking about. Is at the moment, these companies, whether it's Google or Facebook, the advertisers or the people that are selling the products, there is from their point of view, there is nothing to gain. There is something to gain from the environmental point of view, from the human point of view, from many point of views. But to them right now, the best way to be profitable, to continue to be as rich as they are, to sell as much as they do, is to continue to just push people to overconsume and to convince us that we need more and that you need this little thing. So why would they kind of change? But it's just, that's where I think as journalists, we can come in and try and break that, even though these companies and even the tech companies have so much more power than journalists and activists and all of these people.
I boringly a long time ago wrote an article for Wired magazine, and the title of it was "The Amoral London Tech Elite is Driving Inequality." And it was sort of prompted by an article which an Amazon investor had written, where he'd said, first of all, he couldn't buy enough jeans to sort of put the money back into the economy for the economy to work. So he was like, the economy can't work. I have too much money. And it was like the pitchforks. Why are the pitchforks not coming for us? Was his big question. And so he identified two real things where I was just like, yeah, and so I guess I'm almost surprised by these companies from an economic perspective. What they're doing doesn't work. They have too much money, and so to some extent they do sort of just redistribute it in sort of philanthropic organizations, but only to consolidate what they still have. But like, I just can't believe. And this happened when it was a financial crisis. I could not believe that like all of these like CEOs of X companies could go home to their families and be like, oh no, don't worry, we're actually doing good work. Like somebody asked David Cameron a long time ago, how do you sleep at night? And I just I just can't believe that today they wouldn't just go have all the money back. There's literally we don't need it. Like, can't buy enough pairs of jeans. Like, I've done all of the yachts. Like, I'm just so surprised. And this is, sorry, slightly back to the point that you were talking about why things continue in the way that they do. Because if you admit that first moment where you go, oh, actually, I shouldn't have this car, or actually, as a business, we need to change, or actually, as a massive tech company, we need to change the way that we do business. The first moment you admit that is the end of everything.
Everything crumbles.
It has to be it's a first mover thing where, all of them must know, their families must know, every company, every individual knows that, we're going to have to do something about this. And the moment that you whisper it, that's the end.
Of course. And because then it would just be, and what about gender inequality? What about racism? What about homophobia, transphobia? What do we do about everything? And then it's just like, oh, so we've actually built our wealth, our success, our power on the suffering of others. And it's just like, yes, that's the whole point, is to be this rich. Some people are suffering. If it's not people, it's the planet. It's a hard one to admit. And I think to kind of move to like the feelings of anxiety, of fear, of we're doomed. There's a sense of frustration. Like we all remember, it was a month or two ago now, when all those reports started coming out about the top 1% and their 5-minute private jet rides and stuff like that. It's just, that's one of the things that you feel. You're just like, okay, not only do you have the solution, you are the key to all of this, but also you're literally just laughing in our faces. It's kind of like looking at them and being like, well, we know there's a problem. You know there's a problem. We all know that we're pretending the problem isn't there because it would put you in so much trouble. But on top of that, you're actually going to almost tease me about it and be like, well, you know what? I'm making all this money. I'm not really redistributing it. I know that there's something wrong with the system. And on top of that, let me just get my private jet. There's a growing frustration of we know that some people could really help make the situation better, and we see them continue to live as if nothing is happening, and then read in the news that the equivalent of the entire population of the UK has been displaced in Pakistan, and it's just like, well, what are we doing here?
Maybe yeah. I almost can't imagine some of this sort of celebrity stuff. You have to believe must be sort of engineered for entertainment purposes.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I would really, really struggle to believe that if these people had access to all of the money in the world, as we could all understand it, that they haven't clocked this and are. And not that there's a solution. Like, I think that the ultimate thing is like, geez, right, we all live here. You live here, I live here. We only have one life. Me too. Can we? So as much as you can sort of swan off and do whatever, like you're still going to be on fire, and so am I. Humans as we are. It would be hard to believe that they could be doing that without being like, my lawyer told me this is wrong.
Do you know what? I wouldn't be surprised. Some of them
day to day, are they all going like, okay, so
yeah,
in the event of a sort of wildfire, you're going to go to name me another of the Kardashians, Kylie's house, and you're going to go to sort of Kendall's house. Surely they must be. They can't be just going like, well, just burn the jet fuel and then think about it later.
And so when it comes to, so having done exactly what we said we weren't going to do and be like, the planet is burning, guys, what do we do? So it is, there is, I know I've had it a lot where the minute I do something that's not like super sustainable, I feel super guilty about it. I have to log off social media after a certain while of looking at everything that's going on because I'm like, what are we going to do? I think it's important, even though there's an urgency and we need to take action and we need to stay informed. I think caring for our own mental health and well being at this moment is absolutely crucial because things are quite scary. When it comes to eco anxiety, feeling overwhelmed, how would you say, from a journalist or from a personal point of view, we can deal with that and we can make it a more, maybe not a more pleasant conversation, but a more solution based conversation, a less scary and daunting conversation.
You know what? For me, it's very much like bifurcated, like in personal and in um, journalism. Where it comes to journalism, to a certain degree, I've become like desensitized to it, though not really. But also, I feel like I think I find a lot of comfort in knowing that even if it's not big changes, like I said, just writing about it, like doing even the small, like I've written, on business models that are genuinely sustainable, or like places that like are like on architecture that's sustainable. All these small little things that I do may not have like a huge impact. They're not viral pieces, but I feel like these are my parts, and I find these are things that I'm doing, and I find a little bit of comfort in knowing that my journalism isn't just feeding into the trash fire of headlines on jet planes and jet fuels. Um, in personal life, it is quite it is quite scary. In personal life, I do find it like difficult, and that's where I think I have to switch off. Thankfully, I'm not a very huge social media person in general, so I kind of get to like not be exposed to that world. Um, but in journalism, I find comfort in knowing that at least my work is something I'm passionate about, rather than it just being to like feed an agenda or something like that.
I think I'm interested in where the eco anxiety comes from in a sort of general sense, because the more I have learned about this thing, the more certain I am. And so as much as a lot of the stuff that you hear is harrowing, particularly what is going on right now, and often in sort of the majority world or the global south, I feel sort of better to know. And so I don't know whether some of the eco anxiety is because people don't know, and so it's sort of a massive sort of not knowing, and that's more scary. So for me, my personal steps, working as a journalist, were to start knowing about things that I didn't know about before, and building up a picture of going, okay, well, that's that fits in there. This, the news may be a soap opera that you've joined halfway through, but the more you sort of get to know it, the more you go, okay, so that person's related to that person. I personally think, and actually, I think Nelson Mandela might have said it better than me, that education is the best thing that you can do. So I personally find comfort in knowing, while I know that news fatigue and sort of people sort of absconding from news is greater than ever before. So that disappoints me in a way, because as much as some of it is sad, it's happening to people who are alive just like you, and so I think it matters to know. So that's the first thing I would say. In a general sense, a couple of things that I've found recently, which or at least I'd like to flag, are there's a law which fits on a business card. I'm going to show the business card for those who are viewing. So it's called ecocide, which sounds like suicide for a reason. And ecocide means to kill one's home. And there is an organisation that's been campaigning for a number of years to make ecocide law, and they are about to do it. And one of the co-founders died in the last few years, and I saw her sort of collaborator speaking recently, and it was just so moving to see somebody taking something that sounds, you're like, oh, you're mad, like you can't get a law in to say, and I'll just tell you what it says. It says, okay, so ecocide means unlawful or wanton acts committed with knowledge that there is a substantial likelihood of severe and either widespread or long-term damage to the environment being caused by those acts. Now, that's not the snappiest thing in the world, but it does fit on a business card. And what they did was they got a load of legal experts from around the world, like criminal lawyers, lefties, righties, and they said, okay, if we wanted to put this on a business card, what does this need to say? And so a lot of it is sort of legal language, but in the next few years, this is going to be law. And what these people, Stop Ecocide people did was just like, okay, we're not going to focus on sort of like plastic bags. We're not going to focus on like sort of the wildlife. We're going to say, we're going to get this into law and it's going to be law. So I would sort of take heart in the fact that other people have been working on that. Me personally, I'm going to share something with you now. I ride a bicycle, and what I do at the moment is I collect all of our soft plastics and all of our hard plastics into bags over the course of given time, and then I take the hard plastics to what we call the tip, the recycling centre, and I try to find out what they do with that. I'm actually in conversation with them about what they do with that. And then I take the soft plastic to the supermarket because they do something else with it as well, and they assured me that they recycle it. So I have those moments where I'm like, oh, I've had a soft plastic and a hard plastic. So I like bother myself with that in a given day. But that is what I do. The top three things that you can do, as far as I know, are to be vegan, which is tricky if you're a sort of meat-eating world, but vegan is best. Food waste, if you could do nothing else, don't waste your food. The third thing, this might be my thing, is cycling. It is fun. It is good for you. It is freedom. People think that you're attractive if you ride a bike.
From personal experience.
So many of the ills of modern society can be solved by riding a bike. They tried to stop women riding bicycles when they first came out in the turn of the last century, and women did it anyway. It's a radical act to ride a bike, so that is my recommendation. But the thing is, if you ride a bike and you have eaten a burger, that's almost as much as driving a car. Ethical consumer. I saw it and I was like, okay, so you've got to not eat meat. But also take B12 and iron tablets because I was low on iron from not eating enough meat.
Same. I went vegetarian, and then I think within a year, I'd become like severely anemic to the point where I couldn't breathe anymore. But yeah, to go back on the eco anxiety kind of points on a more serious notes, I think. Yeah, it's easy to get overwhelmed. It's easy to feel guilty, to feel doomed, to feel trapped, to feel all these sorts of things. And I actually agree with what you're saying. Educating yourself helps. And it doesn't mean reading all those scary headlines that you see all the time. It just means, understanding, well, where does the root of the problem come from? How is our society built? How do we do things? And kind of deconstructing all of that and, connecting those dots. And the more you know, the less scary these things are because you can rationalize them, you can make sense of them, and I think it all helps. So staying aware, but in a healthier way, not necessarily what the latest news is or what's just come out or the latest catastrophe, but more, okay, as a whole, what does this even mean? Because we talk about climate change, so many people, including myself up until a few years ago, we don't even know what that exactly entails. So going back to those basics, and I think once you start to get that control over it and understand exactly what you're looking at, it enables you to look at it from like a calmer perspective. So I think, keeping ourselves aware, but also taking it one step at a time.
I think the people that talk to me about reading, so people say, I can't really read anymore. Not to sort of really double down on the global conglomerates that have all of the money and all of our time and attention. Again, and a bit back to sort of what else should you do with the time? But like, I think reading is a practice. Reading is not always easy, but the more that you do it, the more that you enjoy it and know.
Yeah, definitely. And if you can't, a good podcast, not that I'm recommending any in particular, but if you can't be asked to read, there's different types of resources out there. Yeah, not this one, any kind of podcast. But no, there's so many ways that we can educate ourselves today, which is so great, and ways that can fit what we want and what we need. And then we've kind of moved on to this part of the podcast anyways, but if we go back to some of the more personal things that people can do, because that's also a big debate, is is it actually possible to live a more sustainable life today, knowing that a lot of what is happening is in the hands of the biggest corporations, the richest? We see all of this narrative that none of what we do really matters because they have most of the power, which to a certain extent I think is valid, but it doesn't mean that there aren't things that we can do. But there's also that narrative. Right now, we are in the middle of a recession. In the UK, there is an increasing cost of living crisis. Mm-hmm. So some people are just thinking, honestly, I don't have time for sustainability. Sustainability is expensive. I've got more practical and pressing issues to think about right now than how I'm going to save the planet. What could we say when it comes to that? What are little things that people can implement in their everyday that don't cost a lot of money, that, apart from what we've already said, that don't take a lot of time and that will not actually impact your everyday as much as you think?
Well, yeah. So I don't have a car. Never had a car. I walk everywhere as much as I can. And that is not at all difficult to do. So it's just as simple as such simple things like this, which it automatically kind of becomes your life, your lifestyle, your habit. You can start with those things. It doesn't have to, like, I think, to a large extent, a lot of people also, like veganism, for example, a lot of people want to try it out, or even like sustainable fashion, or trying all those things. It's daunting because you're just like, is it expensive to do? Mm-hmm. But I feel like, and yeah, maybe it is to a certain extent. It's a bigger commitment. So start with something smaller, like walk instead of taking a car, or bike, because that makes you look good, like Christy said. Or learn more about recycling. So where I'm from in India, like I'm from India actually, and there's not much recycling. And I basically kind of learned about recycling after I moved to the UK, because there's not even that separation, the basic separation of recyclable versus non-recyclable in certain parts of the world. And these are small things and things that you can just kind of make part of your lifestyle, and then as you build towards bigger things, bigger habits. My approach to things: start small and then it can go bigger.
Definitely one small step at a time. Absolutely.
Yeah. I would like to bust a few myths and make a few suggestions. So sustainability is not expensive. What is expensive is, well, many things. And I don't want to suggest that we're not going to be in a sticky situation with how our government and how our companies are treating us at the moment in this country. But reduce, reuse, recycle is actually the 3 R's. We're quickly sort of to get to the recycling thing. But if you don't buy it, then you don't have to buy it. If you can reuse it, then you don't have to buy it. And obviously, if you recycle it, that's good. But from a sort of vegan, I'm not always a vegan, but like vegetables are actually very often cheaper, and I think that there's a sort of mythology around that, but I think that they are. Meat should be expensive, like petrol should be expensive, like these things actually are finite things. So I think that those things should be expensive, and I think that actually it is cheaper to be sustainable than people think, and as I say, reduce. People go, oh well, I don't, why should I not have good experiences? You can go to the local park, throw a frisbee around. You can go and like meet somebody who you've never met before in your local area, give them a good time. There's a lot more that you can do that doesn't cost any money, I would say. The second thing that I would say is move your money. Your money, if your bank is in a bad bank, and there are lots of bad banks out there, there's a campaign called Move Your Money. You can find out which banks are bad, and they are investing your savings in fossil fuels right now. You can just move it to any of the better banks. Easily done. Also, I would say stand for election. But if you don't want to stand for election, vote. Vote for somebody who is better than the people who are doing the job at the moment. Those are the things that I would do. Also, what are you angry about? And if you're angry about it, find a way to approach it that you love. So find the issue that you're angry about first thing, but then do something you love to change it. Like, it's all really boring to like stuff envelopes, but if you really want to go out there and like give out flyers, or if you want to like, I don't know, make videos, pick the thing that you're angry about. Do something that you love to change it.
Absolutely. That was.
I'm speaking to the left in a minute. I'm like, oh my God.
That's like record breaking.
Love all of the
people. And sleep and drink your water and have some fun and laugh. No, yeah. I think just to come back in like the under a minute, and then I'll just have to go through my tips in another recording. But when it comes to sustainability is cheap, I think one thing that's important as well, because I always hear this thing of like, yeah, you're preaching sustainability when it's so expensive. And what about people that can't afford it? One of the things to remember is that the people that live more modestly have the lowest carbon footprints in the first place. So that question is, of course, a valid question, and a question that needs to be asked, and that needs to be a part of the debate. But I think we still need to consider, if you are able to do any little thing, it's not always productive to worry about, yeah, but is this person doing this? Is this person doing that? Is this group doing this? Why would I do something if they're not doing that? Just focus on what you can do.
Sorry, just interrupt to say that what you just said,
Yeah.
I've said that so many times. Like, why are people so like do what you can, don't bother about what others are doing?
Of course. I mean, there is, collective action does work, and we do need to come together and all of these things. But I think, yeah, if we can all individually just try and do our best, and then the more we do, if money and costs are really an issue, the more accessible these things will become. And then just in terms of my tips, yeah, when it comes to how much we consume, actually asking yourself, do I really need this? Do I really want this? When it comes to reusing things, disposables, disposable anything, disposable plates, cutlery, disposable, even like disposable cameras. Like, they're so trendy at the moment. Everybody's using them. That's great. I used to use them all the time because I love film photography. I thought about it. I was thinking, that's a lot of plastic being wasted. So I invested in an automatic film camera that cost me £15 because I bought it from a really nice guy at Marketplace. And a disposable camera is what, £7 to £10? So I've used this camera like 5 times already. I've already made my money back. Just think about recycling as well. We've talked about it. If you're not sure what to recycle where, you can go on your council website, find out. They will tell you, go there, find the resources are there, on even on social media. On social, there are so many pages now that dedicate their time to showing you what to do. If you go to charities, to movements that find the time to find the resources for you and make it so much easier. And I think, yeah, just trying to rethink how we consume, rethink this business model that we're a part of that encourages us to always want and need more, and encourages us to a certain extent, I'm very sorry, but to become so lazy and just constantly live in this state of comfort where it's like, oh, well, I'm going to use this instead of doing it myself, or I'm going to use that instead of using a cheaper alternative that's also more sustainable. Rethinking all of that. It might be something as easy as switching your kitchen roll for something reusable, to thinking, oh, well, do I need this latest piece of equipment, or could I just do with what I'm doing right now? I think the more we ask ourselves these questions, the more we'll realize, as you said, Chrissy, that sustainability doesn't mean spending loads of money on shopping at the sustainable brands that are made in Portugal and it's like £75 for a t-shirt. It just comes with rethinking how you consume, how you live, and where you can cut waste, where you can reuse, when you can reduce what you're consuming already.
The trickiest thing that I found out, and I don't have an answer for this, is, or at least I've not got to the end of the book where it tells you, jobs, certainly in the UK, are based upon demand. So we have to grow our economy through demand from consumers, and otherwise we won't have more jobs for people. And that is the argument. So we need growth, and like the news talks about growth. Every single morning news item on Radio 4, which is what I listen to, will say, oh no, yeah, growth's in the, yeah, we need more growth. And so therefore jobs, growth equals jobs, and therefore consumption equals jobs. One of the outs to that is that in the last 100 years, we've gone from like a 100-hour working week to an 80-hour working week, and we've stuck at like 40 hours for the last 50 years or whatever. And so it would be great. I'm sure we would all love to work sort of 20 hours. What would that look like? How would we all get paid? Are the questions, how would you have a meaningful life that you can contribute to? Some of that's around sort of a basic income, redistributing wealth as well. How do we make sure that everybody can live working on 20 hours, for example? How do we make job shares work, and all these sorts of things? But yeah, we've stuck really stubbornly at about 40 hours working week, when people 100 years ago would have been like, really trying to battle for lower. So I think we have to decouple, if that's again a problematic phrase, but the relationship between work and money and growth or whatever. You know, we have to make sure that people can have a good life, and not sort of sitting at your computer for 40 hours a week going, kill me.
No, yeah, definitely. It links back to what we were saying originally. The system that we're kind of trapped in, we've identified them now, we've gotten there, we can see that it's flawed, and we're starting to identify where the flaws come from. Now the focus needs to be, okay, well, how do we fix those flaws now that we've identified them? And those are questions that the answers will come to with time. But it's just, as long as we continue to rethink and question those things that we're so used to thinking are normal, I think we'll get there. We'll get there. And I think that in itself is a sustainable way of living. It's just questioning what you're doing, what you're seeing, how things function, and thinking, is there a better way to do that? Even though you don't know what the better way might be, asking yourself that question and trying to find out how that could be and if that could be already is sustainable. And then in the meantime, doing those little things to fill in the gaps that you can fill in yourself.
Tax wealth. They don't even want it. Oh. Anyway, sorry, I'm going to stop saying that. I've got to go to a cycling meeting.
No, but that's a great thing to end on. Tax wealth, please, please.
No, well, thank you very much for bringing us together to have this chat. Honestly, Malvika, the first thing that you said, people are not searching for this, that is gold.
Yeah, that was a perfect thing to start on as well, because it's just like, well, there we have the issue. It's not popular.
It's not on our minds on a daily basis.
That's so mad. It's all, like if you're interested in it, it's on your mind. Oh my God.
Absolutely. It's getting it on people's minds. That's what needs to happen right now. And then once it's on everybody's minds, more things will happen. Okay, well, thank you very much, guys, for jumping on. It's been a lovely chat, as always. They're always lovely, these chats. To anyone that's listened this far, thank you very much for joining us today. Don't forget, if you've enjoyed the podcast, to let me know by leaving a review, following me on social media. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or want to take the conversation further, you can get in touch with me through there.